The views and opinions expressed on this show belong solely to the hosts and their guests and do not reflect the views of any on-site institutions unless explicitly stated.
What's up, everybody? My name is Steve Vanderwall.
And I'm Justin Klosser.
And we're your hosts of Cannabis Cum Laude, a podcast devoted entirely to cannabis. We're going to talk cultivation, business, medicine, politics, culture, advocacy, and everything in between.
The cannabis industry is complicated. It's robust. It has a lot of moving parts. And it's our job to help you understand it just a little bit better. So tune in every week for a brand new episode. And if you have a question that you'd like answered on the show, send it on over to questions@cannabiscumlaude.com. Thanks. Enjoy the show. Welcome back to another episode of CCL, everybody. Steve and Justin here talking lighting with the founder and CEO of Horticultural Lighting Group, Stephen Johnson. Stephen hails from Tennessee, where he founded Johnson Grow Lights in 2014, and then in 2016, Horticultural Lighting Group, or HLG. He also founded Flow Gardens a little over a year ago, which specializes in CBD cultivation and consulting. Stephen, welcome to the show. How are you doing today?
Good, guys. Glad to be on. Just super busy over here at HLG for sure, and a lot of fun things happening all the time. We're I guess a little surprise on the show is we are introducing Samsung's newest LED in July. We will have exclusivity with that. Wow. And so we just got the test units built today. We have the first ones in North America. And we'll have that exclusivity, and it's going to be really game changing. So we've had those diodes in testing at Flow Gardens for about 10 weeks now, and the results are out of this world. So really excited right now. So it's been a hectic day because we're getting everything set to start the marketing, the photography and the information that goes on the boxes and all that. And it's going to be very interesting for sure.
Congratulations. That's huge.
Yeah, I'm excited to get my hands on one of those and give them a shot.
So it seems like your background really specializes in lighting. What kind of got you into lighting and lighting in regards to cultivation, and what's kind of the story behind founding HLG?
So, I become a home grower probably, it's been about 13 or 14 years ago now. And I really kind of nerded out back then on the HID reflectors and the science behind how the reflectivity, the direction, the different bulbs, the different technologies. I ran Pulse Start CMH back 860 back when it was nobody even knew about CMH. Just a lot of different, just kind of nerded out on it myself. And I knew LED was the way to go, but back then, they were pretty expensive and pretty janky, so I was buying my stuff from Growers House back then, and they were just starting out, and it was just a couple guys, believe it or not. And I knew Nate, which is the co-founder with his father at the time. And we would just talk shop for hours, talk about different reflectors and how they work, different ballasts, the efficiencies, the pluses and minuses. And so it just got me very intrigued. And just through experimentation, I started building my own LED lights for myself. And it just kind of grew, into what we have today. I met Amit in, I guess it was 2016 online on a forum. And that's my partner. And so we both just nerded out, and we both actually had separate companies. I had Johnson Grow Lights that just had started maybe 6 months prior. And I had already landed about 8 or 10 hydro stores carrying my products at the time. And he had a little company called Northern Grow Lights. And I told him, I said, I kind of have a vision that LED is going to be the future. And we're right there at that efficiency level that was a full spectrum, a little better than a double-ended efficiency wise, and the spectrum was much better. So I said, this is going to get better. This is the future. We should really get into this. And it was kind of a hobby thing. We both worked our normal I'm actually from the construction trade, so I actually owned a contracting service from since I was 20, and Amit was a software engineer / electrical engineer for. He worked on a lot of software at the end, but so somewhere around 2017, it became big enough to where I could kind of quit doing the contracting part and do lighting full time. And from there, I kind of took the approach of building a lot that I wanted myself, and as a grower, I kind of knew what would work and wouldn't work. And that's kind of the direction I went. So I just thought outside the box and went a totally different direction than everyone else. And it worked really well. So we did a lot of homework.
Absolutely. It seems like maybe you should find yourself at the horse track or something as well, being able to call something like that.
Predict the future. Yeah.
So you kind of got into a little bit talking about HID lighting there, and then brought up the LED lighting. And you did throw out an acronym that I just want to clear up for our listeners, for anybody who might not know. CMH stands for ceramic metal halide. It is another version of high intensity discharge or HID lighting. Could you talk to us a little bit about the differences in between how HPS and LED lights work, and like maybe any differences in like their light intensity or how well they penetrate the canopy?
Yeah. So one of the things I figured out early on was that penetration is mostly a function of light volume. Okay. So you can think of light kind of like a volume, like air or water or anything. The given amount in a area would equal is what we call PPFD, or photosynthetic photon flux density. So what I came to understand was there's a couple of rules. So you have the inverse square law, and that states, as you increase the distance from, say, the light source to your target or your measuring plane. So is, for instance, your light to the canopy. When you double that distance, you've cut your intensity by 4. So you're now at 25% intensity. So knowing that was kind of my early on days with experimenting with reflectors and figuring out the perfect, so you saw, like at first you saw your back in the day when Hortilux was the bulb to have, right? HPS 1000 watt, Hortilux single-ended, which was a Awasaki HPS. It was just an HPS that was just slightly tuned, maybe a different gas mixture for street lights, So you had these really giant reflectors, and the thought was I can get closer to the canopy and have this giant reflector, and that's the way to go. But then you saw the double-endeds come out, and the reflector started getting smaller again. So what they learned is with that giant reflector, you're kind of, like I said, so say you're 16 inches from the canopy, 16 inches into the canopy, now you're at a quarter intensity. So what did we learn from that? Well, Gavita, for instance, a double-ended, you're running these things 3 feet from the canopy, right? With that tighter reflector. So you're getting good numbers here. Well, your quarter intensity is going to happen 3 feet instead of 16 inches. So that's why you saw the transition from umbrellas to square, large hoods, then down to smaller hoods. So that's the evolution of HID. So I will ramble on forever. So do get me back on the topic. Sorry about that.
No, that's okay. 100% rambling's good. It's all good information. And honestly, a lot of that I didn't really know. So
yeah, I'm over here taking notes. I'm like, and
yeah. So I was just hoping we could get into the like the differences between HPS and LED, and like is there a difference in light penetration or canopy penetration and the intensity of the light coming out of the LED diodes versus the HPS bulb, and kind of the differences there?
Okay, so as far as penetration, we were talking about the inverse square law there. So It really depends on the application, what the best. So with HID, double-ended, you wanted to run them high over the canopy. You kind of wanted to run them in a checkerboard pattern and just blanket with photons, right? That's what we did for a long time. So ultimately, everyone run rolling tables because concrete, aisles don't grow plant matter. So you push everything together and you have a solid canopy. You're not wasting any light. Perfect. Well, so with LEDs, there's a couple advantages that you can take away from that. With an HID, like a double-ended, you have a lot. So if you pay attention to that spectral chart, you see a little bit of blue, then you see kind of some green, then you see this big orange spike, and then not a lot of red, and then it's gone again, right? Well, what you don't see on the box is out here at 830 nanometers or so is the biggest spike of all, and that's infrared. So 1,000 watts, when you put 1,000 watts into that bulb, you're getting 1,000 watts out. But you're getting 1,000 watts out of that bulb. So about 360 to 380 watts of that input power is in the visible light range, which drives photosynthesis, and the rest is infrared heat that does nothing to grow plants. It just basically waste energy that you now have to deal with. So it heats the canopy up. So you have to run a cooler ambient temperature to have the right leaf surface temperature. So where LED changes the game is they do have waste heat. Okay. So they're not 100% efficient. So what happens, instead of that coming out of the bulb as infrared, it goes into the substrate of the fixture and is then radiated up away from the canopy. So what that does is a couple of things. That allows us to run a warmer canopy temperature or a warmer ambient temperature to reach the same leaf surface temperature, because the leaves are constantly transpiring, which is cooling. They're cooling themselves. What happens when water evaporates? It takes heat with it. So you usually will run 3 to 5 degrees warmer Fahrenheit than you will under an HID to get the same leaf surface temperature. So benefit A is you have less HVAC cost, okay, because you are now running at a warmer temperature, less load. Number two, because you don't have that infrared spike, the reason you couldn't run those HIDs when you started getting closer than 16, 18 inches, even with the big hoods and the air cooling and all that, it would burn the plants. It's because it's basically the same heat that comes off of you. You see those heaters you plug in the wall and they got the wire and it just gets hot. That's the same wavelength coming off of that bulb. So you're basically frying the plant. That's why you could never get but so close. Well, with LEDs, you do not have that wavelength coming out. So you can get a lot closer without damaging the plant. So that's benefit number two. Benefit number three is today in cannabis cultivation, we use a white light LED because cannabis is a chemically complex plant that flowers. So you really need a full spectrum because it's almost like a balanced diet. So you can look at it as a balanced spectral diet for the plant. So the closer to the sun you get, what they evolved under, the healthier growth you're going to see. So with LED, you're getting a very high CRI or color rendering index. 100 means you've almost matched the sun color wise, and the lower the numbers, the lower the match. So with like our fixtures, for instance, you're at 91, 89, 91 CRI. To put that in perspective, a double-ended HPS is 37. So you're really missing a lot of your spectrum there. And that's why when you walk in the room, it doesn't look natural. It looks orange, right? So that's kind of the another benefit. So, the plant is getting a healthier balance of photon nutrition. You can visibly look at the plants without having to have special sunglasses or anything else to be able to diagnose, do I have a pest problem? Do I have a pH problem? Do I have a deficiency somewhere? That HID can mask a lot of that. So now you're under a natural light. And so you can really do a lot better job as a cultivator as well. But the single biggest benefit to LED is the efficiency. So like we were talking about, you pump 1,000 watts into that double-ended HPS, you get 370 watts of visible light or photosynthetic active light. With today's LEDs, you pump 1,000 watts in, you're going to get 600 watts of photosynthetic active light, So we're now putting out the new chip that we're alluding to here. That's going to be, PR will be press release from Samsung, will be co-press release with us around the mid of June. So we're pretty close. The Scorpion Diablo will be at 3.2 micromoles per joule. So that measurement is a number of photons coming out of the fixture per watt given going in. So to put that in perspective, on our particular spectrum, 4.8 micromoles out of a single watt would be basically 100% efficient, which doesn't happen, right? Ever in anything. Nothing's 100% efficient. That's 100% efficiency. So we're well above 50%. We're 60 something percent efficient. As I was saying, that same rule of thumb, you'd get 4.54 micromoles per input watt out of a double-ended if it was 100% efficient. Well, by the time you lose at the bulb and the canopy, you're at 1.8 micromoles per joule. So you can see the difference there. You're getting a whole lot more light per watt driven. So at the end of the day, with a really high efficiency LED, you've reduced your HVAC load and build out cost, and you've cut your electrical usage on the lighting by about 45%. So you end up having a power usage of about 40 to 45% of the total usage. You would use about 45% compared to an HID grow with the same yield potential. So there's the real big kicker.
Yeah, especially, from a commercial perspective, cost management, especially from a utility perspective, is everything, because it doesn't matter if you're pumping out, 5,000 pounds of premium grade cannabis every single month. If your utility costs are through the roof, it's going to be hard to make money. So I guess, obviously LEDs are more expensive than, other lighting sources. But you do end up recouping your costs over time. I guess what I'm trying to understand is, how long does it take to recoup your costs? And what does a utility bill look like for a 600 watt LED for against something like a 600 watt HPS?
Okay, so a 600 watt to 600 watt. So your utility bills are going to be similar, but the difference is that 600 watt LED is putting out more light than a 1,000 watt LED or HPS. So you can look at it one of two ways. Am I buying 1,000 watts? So this say Scorpion Diablo 650 watts replaces a double-ended on 1,200 watts, literally. So I'm now either I can look at it one of two ways. I'm going to spin the same thing, and I've got nearly double the yield potential, or I go ahead and buy that bigger light, and I've cut my utilities in half. You see what I mean? So saying 600 watt to 600 watt would be like, so a 600 watt HPS after reflector loss is about 850 micromoles total output. That's a photon count number. That same 600 watts on a Scorpion Diablo will put out 2,000 plus. So there's the difference. So you're getting a lot more light. So that 600 watt, 3x3 to maybe 3.5 by 3.5, you can put in a 4x4, but you're not going to get maximum production out of that 4x4. The Scorpion Diablo will give you maximum production in over a 5x5. So that's the difference. You've doubled your canopy size almost. Yeah, so that answers that. Then also, when it comes to, you say the ROI. So say you take, for instance, the most popular HID would be the double-ended HPS right now. Say a Gavita again, or anything, dim lux, whatever. So these reflectors are made out of aluminum, and they have a special coating on them. You can't clean them. You're not supposed to wipe on them or clean them. Well, what happens, even if you do figure out a way to clean them, is that, so what does aluminum do? It oxidizes, right? So aluminum oxide is not reflective like polished aluminum. So a couple things. So when they tell you to change out your double-ended bulb every 9 months, you also are supposed to change that reflector, because 50% of the energy coming off that bulb plus is being reflected at least once. So if that reflector is 80% efficient instead of 90% efficient, you're losing light again. So you have to replace that bulb and reflector every 9 months. It's recommended to replace your reflector with the bulb. So now you're talking about every 9 months you're spending $120 on that fixture infinitely. And we're not even talking about the HVAC build out savings or the actual load savings. So ROI is a roughly a year. By the time you get to that first bulb change in most municipalities' power rates, you've broke even on the LED. But here's the really good part. So one thing a lot of municipalities are doing across the country in these states that have legalized is they're doing energy rebates. So they're actually paying for a percentage of the LED light, because through regulation, it's really hard to add capacity and very expensive, because we can no longer just throw up a coal burning power plant to make more power, right? So you got to do something renewable, nuclear, something like that. That's a lot of capital. Well, cannabis production is starting to really weigh on some of these grids in these legal states. You know what I mean? Because a lot of indoor cultivation is going on. So it's actually more economical for a municipality to say, hey, I will pay you to change the LED lighting and lower your load on our grid. And it saves them money versus and give you a rebate on each fixture versus creating more capacity. So sometimes the ROI, like I think Washington State, it's north of 70% rebate. Wow. So ROI is like instantaneous, you know. So some places that, you know, it really shortens that ROI or makes it day one, you know, just depending on the municipality. And in places like California, you know, you're not allowed to add any more footage of grow now without, you know, I don't know if it's this year it kicks in or next year, but you won't be able to do any more added square footage without going LED. So there's also that, because they've seen the writing on the wall as well, that, you know, you start getting, say, federal legalization happens and home grow happens across the country, power grid's going to take a lick. You know what I mean? A big one. So we've got to address this before it becomes a problem.
Yeah, with us having just legalized, I'm kind of hoping that we implement something similar where it's LEDs are a requirement.
And if not a requirement, like you said, offer a rebate or some sort of incentive. You know, you'd hate to see, and correct me if I'm wrong, I think in California now they're mandating people switch over. Is it a mandate switch over to LED by 2023? I mean, imagine operating.
Yeah, there's some date there. I haven't looked into it real deeply, but yeah, that's actually something that's on the table for sure. I think they started out with any new added square footage, but I think they're actually going to back up and make you update.
I mean, imagine trying to do
and you know, if the science wasn't there and it was just kind of a you know, bureaucracy thing, I wouldn't be for government intervention. I'm not a real big government intervening things guy, but in this particular case, we do have a real problem, and it's going to take innovative solutions to make sure that it doesn't
proactive measures for sure
all over.
Yeah, I've heard numbers, and you might even have a more accurate number, that around 1% of the U.S. electric grid is indoor cultivation. And, you know, we haven't even hit federal legalization. Hell, we just hit 15th or 16th states legalized. I mean, what does that number look like when 50 states are legal? You know, it really, all of a sudden, we're looking, as much as we all love this industry, and we actually, you know, our very first episode, we talked to Haley Summers. She wrote,
no, it wasn't the first one.
One of the first episodes we talked, you know, there's that big paper that came out in Nature about, you know, the greenhouse gas emissions with indoor cannabis cultivation. And it's profound. So as much as we love this industry, we're going to run into a massive environmental problem if we don't take steps now. Hell, take steps yesterday to make sure that there are sustainable practices included. Because I'm also like you, and I think Justin is the same. I'm not a big fan of government intervention, but if they don't intervene, our planet's going to be in trouble. So I do hope that if it's not a mandate, there are heavy incentives, especially in New York, like Justin just said, we legalize to push commercial cultivators towards LEDs, because, you know, like I said, it's going to be a really big environmental problem.
And we're going to have a huge industry too.
Huge.
So talking to you and just talking about the efficiency and the power you get out of LEDs, in my head, it really, this next question I have is kind of silly, but it's a huge issue as far as, or maybe even a fallacy we could go to say amongst growers, is that LEDs will not give you the same yield. right? Some people say this, or like maybe the quality is going to be different in some nature. My personal experience has improved quality, but other people say difference. Could you speak to that a little bit, please?
Yeah, so I think it really goes back to when LEDs were first put out there. Like I said, the technology definitely wasn't there, so they used some bogus science. So if you pay attention, you remember the UFOs and the red and blue purpley LEDs and everything. So the science that they tried to use was, you took in the 70s, you'd take a algae and you would smear it out on a glass, and it would respond to red light and blue light. You know what I mean? And so they said that all this other spectrum in this visible light range is just wasted. The plants don't use it, which if you think about it from an evolutionary standpoint, the sun spectrum has in the visible light range, the highest volume is actually green, right? Which they say plants don't use green light. That's why they're green. That's the farthest from the truth that you can get. So are they as efficient with red light or as sensitive to red light as they are, or green light as they are red or blue? No, they're about 70 something percent efficient with green light versus where they're 90% efficient, like 95, 96 with red, similar with blue. So yeah, there is some truth to that, but it's not like they don't use the green light. And the reason is that is the most abundant. So what if you were evolving, what would make sense to you? So here's the most abundant energy source in my repertoire that I can use, and I'm going to ignore it. That doesn't make sense at all, right? That's the most abundant. So, but what does make sense is, so maybe I make myself green, and that way, when I get saturated at the top of my canopy with photons, I'm full. I can't eat anymore. I can't photosynthesize anymore. What do? Maybe I'll turn my leaves and allow that energy to bounce off my green, which if something is green, that means it's reflecting that color into your eyes. So that means it's reflecting those green photons down into the canopy. What happens when that green photon bounces off of something, say, for instance, a leaf surface? It loses a little energy because, again, nothing is 100% efficient. So what photon is next in that range? Orange or red. Those are lower energy photons in the visible light range, right? So blue has more energy per photon, red has the least. So and guess what? Now that green photon is a red photon or an orange photon that drives photosynthesis better, deeper in the canopy. So that's why that the plants are green to begin with. So yes, they use green light. Yes, it's important. So that was the big reason that when people said LEDs don't yield, it's because these people would say you can take this 150 watt UFO and it'll replace 1,000 HPS. Absolutely not. It's just not even close, right? So that happened, and then you had that same misleading information even up to the 2000s and 2010s because the numbers just weren't there. But at some point, when we first started, 2016, 2017, you could match or slightly beat that number of photons out per watt in to an HID. And that's why, say 2013, 2014, if you put 1,000 watts into an LED, it would have matched 1,000 watt HPS. That's true because their efficiency numbers were very similar at that time. Well, now, like I said, scientifically, I can prove to you that there's more light by putting it in something called an integrating sphere. So we send all of our lights off. The reports are available on our website, and a lot of municipalities are starting to do this. A lot of that Growers House, for instance, they actually do this third-party testing now. So it's Department of Energy certified laboratories that say basically we conform to this standard. So when you stick this light fixture in there, that you can be sure that the measurement is damn accurate. You know what I mean? So we're getting Department of Energy certified results. So you stick this light in there and you say, okay, how many photons are coming out of this light? They tell you. Well, a lot of those LEDs that said that replaces 1,000 watt HPS and it was 250 watts. It turns out that we're maybe a fourth of the photons coming out of it. So no, it's not going to yield because it's just the light's not there. The light is the gas, right? So now we're able to, stick in that 600 and something watt range and not only exceed a single-ended HPS's output by 50, 60%, we're able to exceed a double-ended's output by 20 to 30%. So now, no, the yield is absolutely there. We've got guys like, I'm not familiar if you guys are familiar with Wolverine Grown on Instagram, but he actually uses a lot of our lights, and he's continually pulling 3 pounds off of a 650R, which is 640 watts. That sounds pretty reasonable for 1,000 HPS yield to me. I mean, I hear guys say I get 5 pounds of light, and I'm like, show me.
Right.
Yeah.
Big bud, what is it? I mean, it's not Girl Scout cookies, I promise you.
Yeah, and how big is your light too, right?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah. So, but the reality is the yield is there now. So like I was saying earlier, then you hear these claims of LEDs don't penetrate, right? That was always the thing you hear. LEDs don't penetrate. Well, again, penetration is a volume thing. It's a spread and a volume thing. And back then, the volume wasn't there. The light output wasn't there. So, of course, it didn't penetrate because it was never there to begin with. But now, we have guys that actually say that their lower growth is better with the quantum boards than they had with their HID, and I can explain why that is. So think of each individual LED on a board as a point source of light. Okay, so light's coming out of here, light's coming out of here. So one of the things we do in a greenhouse to actually increase yield, it's not because it's necessarily blocking out the light, it's because it makes the light refract or spread, is you put shade cloth on, right? You've heard of that in high sun environments. You can put that shade cloth on, and it actually helps with penetration because you're now the sun is a 1-point source, so it's beaming down. It's like take a flashlight. You stand out in the sun, you've definitely got a shadow, right? So if you have a leaf, it's going to throw a shadow. Well, if you put two light bulbs in a room, and there's now 2 weaker shadows. You see what I mean? Because you have different point sources. With LEDs, for instance, the Scorpion Diablo, you have nearly 4,000 point sources all of a sudden. So that shadowing is going to be a whole lot less because even though it may be blocked coming from this particular LED, you've got light coming from here, and now so that's the thing. Now I will argue that penetration is better with LED than with HID.
Awesome. So this, guys, we're trying out something new this week. We're going to split our episode into 2 different parts, and this is going to conclude part 1 of our interview. So if you tune back in a few days, we're going to have part 2 coming out. I do want to let you know that when this episode's coming out, it's going to be this Friday. It's Friday. And so tomorrow today, I'm going to be traveling to Maine for the Beanstalk Conference. And I'm going there with a good friend of the show, Tommy Potseed. He actually recently started a show of his own where he's reviewing different cannabis cultivars, and you guys should check him out on YouTube. But anyway, we're heading to this conference. It's for cultivators and breeders and genetics and clones and all of those things. So if you guys have any questions, shoot them on over to questions@cannabiscumlaude.com, and we will get those answered for you.
Thanks to our friends here at Rockbox Recording and Production in Rochester, New York. They are a full professional podcast and video studio designed by a radio guy for podcasters. Audio, video, voiceovers, editing, whatever. Mouth off at Rockbox at rockbox.com.
You can follow Cannabis Cum Laude on LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, and Cannabuzz. Type Cannabis Cum Laude into your search bar and you should be able to find us, but the links will also be posted in the episode notes as well. If you want to help support the show, head on over to Patreon, and that will ensure that we're able to keep the best quality sound and video coming to you on a regular basis. And if you liked what you heard today, please don't forget to rate and review the show.